Good evening, everybody. And if you're just tuning in, you are listening live to the Angel Rock. I'm your host, Lorilei Potvin. Do you want to give a shout out to Wayo Waldo? You were here before we got started. Wayo Waldo, welcome. He's over on our YouTube channel. Tonight, we are not on UFO Paranormal Radio on YouTube. If you want to watch the show, that's not going to be back for a couple days. Somebody got a strike, usually through no fault of our own. Something gets said, and our friends at YouTube don't like it. So, so we are over on UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials. That's our second channel. Our third one, oh God, you know what? If you go over to UFO Paranormal Radio on Facebook, it's our page. All you have to do is like it. You can see the show live there. You can also see it live on my Facebook page, my main profile. You can see it also on my YouTube channel, but we prefer that you go to our show channel. There's way more people there. You can chit chat with them. I do want to warn people, it happens every week. They go to my Facebook profile, and for some reason, I can't see the comments. So, hi, Debbie, Grassburger Schmoley. Hey, how's it going? She says, hi, Laura. I want to get into our intro, you guys, and anybody else popping in, share it with your friends. We'd love to have you here. We'd like to make you part of the conversation. If you've never been to my show before, I tell people I cover all aspects of the esoteric and the paranormal, and I have regular, everyday people from all walks of life, either professionally or esoterically, as guests. The work that they're doing, they're making a positive change through human or for humanity, and I love to have people like that on my show. And our guest night is no different. But just a little bit about myself. I'm a Canadian clairvoyant medium, crystal Reiki energy healer, Akashic Records practitioner, a spiritual teacher and mentor, and I'm also a registered nurse. And I also forgot, sorry, we're going live and had a few little things not working out, set you right off when you've got your whole script in your head. But we are being broadcast to you live from New Orleans, Louisiana through United Public Radio Network. I want to give a huge shout out to Joe Montaldo, who owns the network. He produces many of the shows here on the network, as well as he has some great shows of his own on Wednesday nights and on Saturday evenings with Michelle DeRoche. They've got the Gray Zone. Michelle also has her own show with her wonderful co-host Amelia Pisano on Wednesdays and Thursday nights. There's something for everybody here, so make sure you check it out. Please support our channel. Please share it with people so they can find out all about our network. So my guest tonight, I want to give a huge shout out also to Gavin Lee Davies. He's been on the show. He's a friend of the show. He's a friend of mine. He always sends me fantastic people to have on my show, and our guest tonight is no different in any way, shape, or form. And the cool thing is we usually just get to meet right when we come on the show. So this lady, I'm going to read about her bio. Her name is Anna Parkinson. She's a healer, a writer, and a former BBC documentary producer, as well as an author. She's got some great books out there. In 2007, she published Nature's Alchemist about John Parkinson, a famous 17th century herbalist whose books had been passed down through her family. However, while writing it, Anna was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Despite the success of her book, cited by the Telegraph as one of the top 10 books of the year, excuse me, Anna found her outlook was changed completely by her efforts to overcome the brain tumor. When it proved to be inoperable, she explored healing and discovered a radically different perspective that enabled her to banish the tumor and its symptoms without surgery or medicine. As a practicing healer, Anna's fascination with the power of healing and the silent language of the body has deepened continually since that time. This is right up my alley, this topic. In 2014, she published Change Your Mind, Heal Your Body, designed to demystify healing and help others through a similar process. The book we're going to be talking about tonight, Beyond Sex and Soup, Living a Spiritual Adventure. Can't wait to get into this title, why you named it that. Aims to enhance the everyday experiences of living, loving, relating, and dying with powerful invisible tools that anyone can use to overcome personal emotional challenges woven into an account of the author's mother's last journey into death. The reader will find here the means to expand horizons on life and uncover happiness and individual purpose through the challenges humanity currently faces. Welcome, Anna. I've been so excited to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And I'm really excited to be here. It's lovely.
Well, you know, the one thing, well, I'm going to read Debbie's comment. She says she loves that women stepping into their power and healing themselves and sharing that with others. And as soon as Gavin sent this to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is right up my alley. But before we go any further, because when people hear that topic, or I mean, the name of your book, the one we're going to be talking about, how did you come up with the title? It's Beyond Sex and Soup, right? So, how did you come up with that?
This publisher has a really great editor who happened to be the same editor for my previous book, Change Your Mind for Your Body. And I was really uncertain about this latest book, Beyond Sex and Soup. It was kind of really personal, but it was also sort of universal. And when I started it, I thought, oh, look, I know these things work. I've been through this journey. It works for me. I'm teaching this stuff. I just need to write it down. And it's really simple. It'll take me a few months, and that's fine. And I sort of started to write this book. And in my mind, what I was trying to do was explain that, you know, we live in this vehicle, this beautiful body, which has needs. And you can't ignore those because your body's going to fall apart if you do. But your spirituality is not an alternative to living in this vehicle. Living in this vehicle is part of it. So, you know, the sex and the soup, they're givens, they're necessary for your own sustenance and the propagation of the species. But at the same time, you're having, with a different language and a different perspective, you're having a really subtle and extraordinary and magical adventure. So I wanted to explain how some of the most negative things in your life, you know, your anger or your misery or your jealousy or all of those terrible feelings that we go through, they are also actually information. They are helping you to get to where you to an insight that will really lift your life and carry you deeper and make it feel better. So it's beyond sex and soup because this is not an alternative. It's not like we're going to go hang out with the angels and never have to worry about where our next meal is coming from.
I have to agree with you. I apologize, guys. I hope you can hear me okay. Are you hearing anything weird noise? Because I am. Are you okay with the audio? Everybody, let me know if you are. How about you, Anna? Are you hearing anything?
I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah.
Perfect. I always wear a Super 7 crystal, and I usually forget to take it off. And I even remember to take it off today because my partner is also on this network on Thursday nights. His show is called The Delicious Recipe, not a cooking show. But he always reminds me, he goes, Laura, your crystal's rubbing. You can usually hear it. I thought I have a little bit of feedback, and I thought, not feedback, it sounded like something was rubbing. So you guys let me know. I heard something like a cough in the back, but I can hear you both. Perfect. That's fine. Thanks, Debbie. No, this is right up my alley because, first of all, I always say I've been so blessed to be there hundreds of times at the beginning of life, working in the NICU as a nurse. And then I worked out in the community and I did a lot of technical stuff, but I also did a lot of palliative care. You know, so, and I also worked in one of the most lowest income, dangerous parts of our city. I almost didn't take the job, and I'm so glad I did because it taught me many life lessons. But you're right. And I often say that, you know, I hope, well, I guess I always do say this, first of all, we got to focus on what we want to see, not what we don't. But my dream is that from the moment children incarnate into this lifetime, that meditation, like you said, spirituality, all of these things that, you know, emotions, things we go through, there's so much to learn from that, but we have a choice, right? You either have the proverbial glass half full or half empty, depending on how people look at the situation. But a lot of people just think that when they hear the word spirituality, It's just a bunch of woo-woo. I'm sure you've heard that term in this field before. And that's for people that only, sit in the lotus position for 12 hours a day and live with their heads up in the clouds. And it's not, because I believe that just like pain is the physical body's message, like, hey, pay attention here. So are things like jealousy and anger, anxiety, depression. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I mean, my body led me by the nose into healing. I mean, I had to come to healing because I had a serious condition that was inoperable.
Absolutely.
And I had to listen to that inner voice that I think that speaks to us all in terms of crisis. And my voice said, "This is your head. And it may be just a case to this doctor or that doctor, but it's your head." And I understood that to mean that I had to sort it out. Mm-hmm. And that led me on a journey which was very obviously not always straightforward, because you don't know where you're going when you're going on a journey.
Yes.
And you're dealing with the pain, and you're dealing with the fear, and you're dealing with the shock. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, what I was learning to do was to trust the inner voices, the inner senses, and childlike discover where they could lead me. And so where they eventually led me, with a lot of hard work, it's not just like you kind of open your eyes and go, oh, that's fine. But where they eventually led me was to learn this language of the body, the inner language of the body. Right. And also in the process of kind of sifting through my own rubbish that I was carrying around without realizing, they led me on an exploration of my unconscious and a release of all this stuff. Because honestly, if I could sum up every spiritual tradition in 2 words, it would just be let go.
I agree, because I
essentially, essentially, you've just covered, unconsciously, you've just covered yourself with a lot of defenses, which become like armor, which is a burden and a tension.
I was going to add, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. I don't usually have a delay, but we're going to be getting a thunderstorm, I think, so hopefully it'll hold off. Okay. But what I wanted to say was, and I never give away anything that would ever identify somebody when I do a reading or healing session, but something that really came up in this reading this weekend, and this was some of the words I actually said to this person, was, you can use the term shadow work if you will, but I was explaining it about how we as individuals can be all those things. And I actually use Charles Manson as an example. We look at somebody like that and we say, oh, we're not one of those people. We don't want to be one of those people, but we have the potential to be it all. But I said, it starts as a small child, right? Maybe somebody as a child loves to be acting and putting on plays, and mom and dad or the family, I'll say, has a bunch of company over. So they want to put their play on. Everybody look at me, look at me, look at me. And the parent says, no, that's not appropriate, not time for that. Children should be seen and not heard. So the child starts to learn certain things, right? And then we put it, that it's bad. So we put it in our bag almost, and then we carry it forward into adulthood and our experiences. Because I love this, because there's always topics Gavin gives me. There was some that I really wanted to touch on with you, because I talk about these things as well often. Sometimes you have to go to the darkest places to find the brightest light. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that what happens is that you become very vulnerable when you're in pain or in trouble. Mm-hmm. And your vulnerability makes you wide open to what is essentially the beneficial essence of our life. Mm-hmm. And that's why the dark places open you to your need, which is to receive and to receive support and love and so forth. And really what happens is that you shed your armor. And our armor is necessary. I mean, no parent brings up a child to be hard and ruthless and to lose that beautiful spirit that young kids have deliberately. What they're trying to do is they're trying to teach their children to protect themselves.
And I'm glad you said that, because I forgot to add that that's with not any judgment or pointing a finger, because I believe that as parents, or dealing with people in general, most people, if they're well balanced mentally and what have you, they don't necessarily always go out to try and do the worst thing, right? Especially somebody you love. You have the best intentions.
So what I think happens is that all of our external senses, when you do biology, they'll tell you have 5 senses. Every single one of those senses, whether it's taste or smell or sight or hearing, essentially it's there to keep your physical body safe. That's what it's about. It's about nourishing you. It's about seeing whether there's a truck coming down the road. It's about hearing if there's a tiger about to charge you.
Right.
All of those things, but they're there to keep your body safe. And because we perhaps we're not taught, or it's not sufficiently in our culture, and I think that in Christian cultures, it's been unsafe for a long time to have an individual, to use your individual knowledge, your inner knowledge. It was done by the authority, which was the priesthood, which was safe. We don't really teach our children that alongside these external senses, which are very important, you have your internal senses.
Yes.
And your internal senses are so powerful. They're running your body all the time. They're telling you when to go to sleep, how to go upstairs, who you want to sleep with, what you want to eat. I mean, all the time, your internal senses are running your life. But we are so accustomed to looking at our conscious mind that we get the feeling that we know it all.
Yes.
We get the feeling that we know more than we know. Whereas in fact, it's the reverse. Your body knows more than you do. And
oh goodness.
What the very interesting thing is that when I was first diagnosed with this brain tumor that caused me eventually to become a healer and write a book about healing, that was the first book, Change Your Mind, Heal Your Body. The problem that I had was double vision.
Okay.
And I was still working, I was working as BBC producer, I was making documentaries, but I would notice that if I was sitting and looking at something for a while, I might be seeing 2 people on stage, and then suddenly there were 4 people.
Oh, wow.
And anyway, this was a long, long process, which eventually resulted in this diagnosis. But very early on in my BBC career, I was lucky enough to and determined enough to get myself to Ladakh in northern India. And it's a sort of sister state of Tibet. But I had lived in China, and Tibet was a closed country at that time. And but I was really interested to see what another Tibetan Buddhist country will be like. And I went to Ladakh. And while I was there, I was able to interview the Dalai Lama.
Oh, wow.
And there were just 3 reporters interviewing him. And I was from the BBC, and there was a woman from the local radio station, Lorilei, and there was a woman from France Inter, from Paris. And so I asked him a political question. And I said, because I was thinking about my editors, my bosses at home.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why would they want you back in Tibet? There's a younger generation and they've grown up under the Chinese, and perhaps they don't understand you as a spiritual leader. And perhaps they want, what the Chinese can offer. And he said, when you are young, you see with one eye and you hear with one ear. And when you grow older, you see with two eyes and you hear with two ears. And I was thinking, how am I going to explain this, to put this in a political program for my bosses,
Yes.
But I never forgot what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And all those years later, I suddenly understood when I was ill, I suddenly understood that there was a completely parallel language that I had been experiencing all my life, but I hadn't noticed it. Mm-hmm. And it was running me, it was running my body, it was running my life. And I was not communicating with it. I wasn't understanding it. And eventually, when I came to write Beyond Sex and Soup, it is, in a way, it's specifically about cultivating this double vision.
Okay.
Which, the paradox of the fact that, you have energy constantly moving and constantly changing inside you, and that energy is changing the external world. And you think it's the external world that is affecting you. Mm-hmm. And so if you learn to understand your own energy, and if you learn, then you have power. You have power to change that. You don't have power to change the external world, except by changing the energy that you put into it.
I agree with you, because I often say that when I'm doing some teaching, that the only thing anybody can ever change is yourself. How
Absolutely.
You react, what you do with your life, how you choose to think, how when you start really looking into this and realizing exactly what you just said. And, people thought this was this amazing new thing that had come out, The Secret, how many years ago? And then people were so disappointed when it wouldn't work for them because it didn't give them all the components to it. But okay, so let's stop for a second. Now, we've got people listening from all over the world, and thank you. And I will remind you, if you're just tuning in, you want to watch the show, we are on tonight, not United Public Radio Network's YouTube channel. We are over on the UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials. We're also on many of Joe Montalto's pages, as well as the UFO Paranormal Radio Network Facebook page. You can watch there. If you're on my profile, and I'm glad you are, I always go afterwards and try and interact with the comments there. I can't see them. So if you come to, like I said, the UPRN page on Facebook or the YouTube channel, we can see you and interact with you. But back to this. So we've got somebody here who's hearing this. Maybe they've got a terminal illness or something going on. I've met so many people. The climate globally over the last 2 years has been so vibrationally low when it comes to energy, with the anger, the fear, so much arguing, division, what have you. So somebody says, okay, I'm hearing Anna and Lorilei talking about this right now, that I can't change what's going on outside. I can change what's coming from within. What would you suggest, besides buying your great book, but what would you suggest? How would people find out? Oh my goodness, we're getting these awful spam messages. Please forgive me. This must be a bot. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and answer. I'm going to try and get rid of this.
How would I suggest?
Where would they start?
Well, I use, when I'm healing, I use a language of energy. I mean, I honestly, I do think that all healing is the same thing, in the sense that it is focusing the energy which is all around us, and channeling that into the person who needs healing. but it comes in different languages, and you have to work with the one that works for you. But I work with the language of the body. If somebody has a physical illness, that expresses something about the emotional tension that they have been carrying. And they may not be aware of this emotional tension might have formed, as you say, Lorilei, a long, long time ago. So that you've got past it, you've dealt with it, you've done all these brilliant things in your life. But the fact is that even when you reach, the last day of your life, you are still, part of you is still that little child inside. But you are also the mother of yourself, and you are also the father of yourself. And you can help yourself in that way by listening to yourself, just as you would your own child or someone that you love or someone that you wanted to support. So different symptoms, the language of a human body is universal. Everybody who has a particular symptom, it will point to a particular feeling. And our bodies don't distinguish between what is physical and what is non-physical. They can't afford to. They work really, really rapidly, and they process information at an incredible rate. And so they don't make a distinction between a thought and a matchstick. You know that one thing is a matchstick and the other thing is a thought, but your body is already on the case as soon as you have a thought. And when you have a feeling, your body will hold that story until you see it and are ready to let it go. And it doesn't do that because it's mean or malicious. Your body loves you. It's your best friend. It doesn't care about anybody else in your life. Its job is to reach balance and stay alive and regrow as much as it possibly can. And obviously there's going to come a point where you're going to die and the end of your life will come. But there is this dialogue waiting to be held within your body. And it expresses itself through physical symptoms and emotional tensions and pain, as well as pleasure. Pleasure. Let me not be too grim about this. So when you have a really difficult emotion, let's take anger. It's a great example because one of the things about anger is that it seems clearly that it's someone else's fault. And yet, if you're really angry with someone, you feel they've mistreated you, you feel they've misbehaved, you're actually holding a relationship with that person. Even if you really don't like them, you're having a kind of a tug of war with them.
They're taking up space. They're taking
exactly.
Up and they could not even be giving a thought about you, but people, they hang on to revenge, a grudge. Like they always say, and I believe this, you don't have to forgive what they did, but you have to forgive them because you release it then, right?
Exactly. And the fact is that there are really quite, the joy of releasing is akin to the joy of having a tug of war with someone who you don't like and then letting go of the rope. They're going to fall over. But actually, I have found that the best way to release that anger is to ask yourself what it is in you that makes the other person behave in this completely unreasonable way. Because once you ask that question, even if you don't come up with the answer straight away, there will always be an answer. you will always come up with an answer because you know so much more about yourself at an unconscious level than you do consciously. So, for example, I've worked with a child. She was 12, 13. She was brought to me by her father because she was being badly bullied at school. And when we focused on the bully, it was possible for her to say that actually this child who was bullying her, she could see that she had what this child wanted. In spite of the fact that the child was always belittling her, she had better grades, she had more friends, she had nicer parents, or she didn't want to swap her parents with this child's parents. And once she was able to see that actually it was her contentment that made her a target for the bullying, she was able to let that hook of fear that she was going to be put down by this girl, she was just able to let it go. And I think we can all do that because that's where our power is. And we don't have power over the other person. We can't actually, storm up to a bully and behave the way they do. We have to behave our way. We have to use our power. So anger is a really, you can even get to the stage where you're grateful to this person you're angry with for showing you something that you didn't see about yourself. It was like looking in the mirror and thinking, oh, okay.
I didn't see that.
I can make that better.
Okay, so I have an example for you, and I run into this a lot, is people that are adults that say have had a parent or parents who are narcissistic, that have, say, borderline personality disorder, or both, coupled with a lot of substance abuse. It's very deep-seated because the person has been carrying it their whole lifetime. So as a suggestion, because I think this would really help a lot of people, if we talked about it, if you're open to it, I'm sure you are.
Absolutely.
How can we help somebody better with that? Now, again, it has to be this person's decision that we're working with. I understand that because, like you said, we've got to let it go. But what better way as healers, and I'm asking you from my perspective as well, could we help people like this to be able to let something like that go, that when you look at it, I'm a medical intuitive, it's literally like wound around like vines and thorns and really around the heart chakra, and then it's growing roots. Like, it's a lot to untangle. So how can we better help them as healers, or even a person listening help themselves?
I think definitely they can be helped, and definitely healing helps. So what I would say, and actually, I'm so glad you asked that question, because this is exactly why I wrote Beyond Sex and Soup.
Well, there you go.
It's full of, I start with the issue of insecurity, lack of trust because of fads, or lack of care, or perceived lack of care from the mother. And I move on to the emotions that the unconscious carries, and then to anger and self-confidence, and then to love, and so on, because these are all the emotional aspects of the energetic zones of the body. But in each case, when I'm working as a healer, obviously I will do the energy work for the person who wants it themselves. But always, I think that real, substantial, powerful progress comes from you engaging with your healing and doing the work yourself. And so I describe in the book, and I also teach, and I use a lot of guided meditations to allow you to develop your sensitivity to your own power and growth and existence as an individual. So, and that example that you gave, where there's been neglectful or abusive parenting, it's tough. It is really, really tough. We come into the world looking for love, and the way in which naturally as babies we love our mum and we love our dad, whoever they are. They could be axe murderers and we would love them.
Yeah.
And so the way in which they present love to us is reality for us until we perceive that actually there are millions of realities, zillions of realities, and we've each got a different one, and we can create our reality. And ultimately, we are, as physical beings, we are made of earth. You know, we are made of carbon, minerals, and everything that we have as flesh and blood goes back to the earth when we die. Everything we put in our bodies comes from the earth. Everything we clothe ourselves with, everything that we shelter ourselves with comes from the earth. And although your mother gets you here and is worthy of much gratitude for that, actually you grow, as I describe in my book, you grow more like a plant than we take credit for. So for example, when you have a tulip bulb never grows true from seed. When a new tulip comes along, it gets gradually fatter and fatter and fatter, and it has to separate from the mother bulb and grow its own roots. And then it grows as a beautiful, strong tulip. And we, as we become adults and we deal with our difficulties, we are much more like that. So I think that we forget it, but we need, as adults, to develop our own roots, our own relationship with the earth, and we can do that. And the earth is very receptive to, I mean, you know, the energy of the earth is humongous.
Yes.
Whatever we do, right or wrong, collectively we can damage it, but individually, nothing that we can offer is going to be stronger than the earth. And actually, even collectively, what we're doing to the earth is killing us. The earth will develop in its own way. We're killing, by overusing its resources, we're killing the beautiful garden that we've been living in. It's not the earth that will die, it's humanity.
Right.
But as individuals, the earth can take anything, and that we, you know, may have held on to or felt constrained or couldn't express in our domestic home environment. And so she provides this enormous source of rest and strength and energy and shelter. And ultimately, we begin to trust that relationship and learn from that relationship, perhaps in a way we couldn't do with our own mother. If we can develop that strength, we then become very much more compassionate to the people who have hurt us without trying, because we don't feel vulnerable anymore. We don't feel like we're under attack.
I think we're in an epidemic of people feeling or expressing about feeling, though, when I'm seeing it everywhere, and I'm not a negative person, but a lot of narcissism, a lot of people are not aware. Maybe it's just where I live in North America versus being over in Europe and that side of the world, but many people very self-absorbed, not everybody. I'm not painting everybody with the same brush, but a lot of people, it's about materialism and what have you. That's why I say I've always been so blessed. I've never gotten tired of seeing a baby being born, but also the life lessons that somebody is learning when they're transitioning out of this lifetime, and as I call it, going back home, what they learn, that all the things maybe their whole life that they thought were important, they suddenly realize they don't matter anymore. And I've met people or looked after people from all walks of life who have never said, gee, my only regret is I didn't make enough money. Or my only regret is, I didn't
Yeah.
do this. What it always was I never told the people I loved around me enough how much they meant to me, how important they were, how I really truly saw them in my eyes, and that they needed to hear it, not just every day, several times a day. And I wish that I had followed the dreams that I had always wanted to fulfill, but I hadn't, because I always had an excuse that when I lost that 30 pounds, or when I found the perfect partner, or whatever it was, instead of living in the moment, because tomorrow's never promised. I talk about this a lot, that just saying all we have is now and pausing, that's already in the
That's
past.
that's why your body is such a great teacher. That's
Mm-hmm.
why your body is your best friend. Because
Mm-hmm.
when your body says, sorry, mate, it's too painful, you can't walk, or when your body says, when your body creates a limit, it says, enough,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot move past this tension. Listen,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what pain and illness does for you. Now, if you're lucky, you will be able to deal, as I was very lucky, you will be able to deal with this illness, and it will teach you what you need to know for the continuing development of your spirit, of your soul, which is really what you brought in and what you're going to take away with you.
I think
But
part of
I think we're going through, I think, to mention your other point about this epidemic of selfishness and narcissism, I think what we are going through a collective transition,
mm-hmm.
which we're aware of, that our Western way of being is not sustainable, and we know that really very well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are individually, when we're threatened, we're individually protected. And a lot of people, retreat into their selfish armor, if you like, because they feel threatened. And it is chaotic at the moment. And what do you do when it's chaos? You dig your roots deeper. You
Mm-hmm.
dig deeper, because if there's a storm, you don't want to be blown flat.
Sure.
You want to know that you can still stand in the storm. So you have to develop your own strength and love what you can do, love who you love, and be true to your to any desire you have that you really love. I mean, desire is not bad. It's just a question of whether you really, really love what you're doing.
And so many people don't. Oh, hey, I've got my door open here. Give me a second. I guess my dog came in. I'm so
So,
sorry, because you'll hear everything. Hang on, guys. Sorry. What is this? Oh, the dog came in. Did you, doggy? Thank you. There's the door. There we go. Stay, stay, stay. Sorry, guys, about that. It's going to be a rustle while I sit back down. No, I hear what you're saying, because you're right. And I would love to see more people understand this. When we were talking about just a few minutes ago, because I think this will really resonate with a lot of people, but they'll be wondering, how do I start? Where do I go? How do I hear my body? But before we get to that, I wanted to mention one thing. I think that if we do listen to our bodies, like we keep a book by our bed and we jot down when we've had a dream, just what it was before our feet hit the floor, because we forget 80 to 90%. I think there's so many messages even in there, but it's really quieting the mind and listening. For example, I came from a very abusive family. I don't talk about it very much, mother, because I don't want somebody's pity, but if there's something to be learned from it. But what I will share is that I had a hard time letting things go and forgiving. And probably about 5 years ago, I didn't know a lot about my mother's childhood, except that her father was an extremely abusive alcoholic gentleman that took his life when she was 16, and she was the person that found him. That's pretty well all I knew. In this dream, I'd only seen a few pictures of my mother as a child. I was in the room with my mother as a child at the age of 4. I could describe the little dress she was wearing, the cardigan, the whole bit. And I'd never met her father. He had been long gone before I had passed, or before I'd been born. I had passed. I haven't passed yet, hopefully, talking to a zombie. But I saw what my mother experienced as a small child, and it was absolutely horrific. Do I know if it really happened or not? No, I don't. But the thing is, it gave me so much compassion and so much understanding, because I've been asking Spirit for a way to let this go, to be able to forgive. And it gave me so much. It was such a gift. It was a horrific thing to witness, because it was like I was watching a TV show. But it was a gift, because I never in a million years could ever have perceived that where somebody has come from as a child, meaning your own mother, who we all put our parents up on a pedestal because that's where they are when we're young. They're our whole world, right? When we're little kids. And I think it was such a gift. But the whole reason I share this story, I don't think I've ever shared it on my show before till now, is that you are right, that there's so many messages around us that if we just learn to pay attention, and I think part of it is being able to be still, being able to be quiet, taking notice of what's around me. What am I seeing? Why is this showing up? Whether it's a song at an appropriate time, whether it's numbers you keep seeing, or your body, like you're talking about, you've got a serious illness, you've got a pain, you've got something there. And if you're able to deep breathe and quiet your mind and really ask your body, what are you trying to tell me? You will always hear an answer, I believe. Don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, although your body is actually extraordinarily logical. I mean, I think that's an amazing story that you've shared there, and it's very moving. And the reason the dreams are so powerful is because they are the language of your unconscious.
Yes.
And when you go into sleep, there is your unconscious, which has the total perspective on your life. Your conscious mind does not have that.
And the real executive that actually runs the whole show, people think it's the brain.
No, exactly. It's the unconscious. But the unconscious is childlike. It's powerful, but it's vulnerable. And the executive, the conscious mind, thinks that to survive, it's got to put all that behind it. It's got to put that small, vulnerable child behind it. And so it does very effectively. I would suggest that you probably absorbed your mother's experience when you were still in the womb.
Oh, maybe.
Because it was in her unconscious. And in your, while you were growing in her, you were taking in all her nutrients, all her blood and everything, but you were also taking in all her feelings. So they stayed then in your, what we call imagination, but it's your memory. I mean, your imagination is the language of your emotion.
Absolutely. I even say with abilities that I have or I use, that you have to be able to, you're not imagining things, but you have to be open to possibility. And I believe, because I've had people ask me lately in various readings and stuff, well, how do you get that back? Like, I mean, I had a great imagination as a child, or, or how to play. I think one of the best things is if you're able to be around children and sit down and observe and ask if you can be part of the game. A child will teach you, or an animal like a pet. A pet is unconditional love. They love to play, and really being
Absolutely.
present in the moment. So many of us are, yeah, okay, I'll play with you, but we're on our phone, or we're, I really don't want to be here, but I don't want to hurt your feelings. And children are intelligent little beings. They know when you want to be there and when you don't.
Absolutely. And actually, I mean, I think that's really true. There's that wonderful line in the Bible that I only understood when I started to learn healing. And it says something like, suffer the little children to come unto me. Mm-hmm. And meaning that, children get it. And I think that if it's very difficult for you, and you really want to experience the world in a more receptive way, pretend you're 5 years old. Just pretend.
So many people say they've forgotten how to pretend. Nobody has forgotten how to pretend, because everybody knows how to lie. That's the opposite end of pretending, but you can still lie. And I think it's more self-consciousness. You don't have to have anybody around to pretend that you're a child. There's a reason why. I always say, because I'm very well versed in the paranormal as well. That's actually how I discovered my gifts from our previous home, being in an extremely haunted home for 11 years. And the thing is, children, especially young children and pets, can see spirit. Always, always, always. And people will ask that because they live in the now. There's nothing encumbering them. There's not the ego saying, oh, no, you didn't see that. No, you're not hearing it. No, they just are. A child's work is, play is a child's work. And if we could be more childlike.
Yeah, but don't you think, so this is what I mean about this kind of double vision. So yes, animals definitely have it. Children have it also. Mm-hmm. And then you'll notice that as children get to be about 9, 10, 11, 12, they're coming into adolescence, and they need the protection of their external senses or their conscious mind to be able to function in the adult world. And to be honest, we would wish that for our own children. We don't want them to be so open and vulnerable that they don't know how to function, or they don't, they can't calculate the size of a doorway, or whether, someone has got good intentions or bad intentions. We do expect them to have some self-protection. But unfortunately, in our culture, we don't keep the undercurrent going. We belittle it, as you say. We treat children as unintelligent beings, whereas in fact, they come in with all the intelligence, and it's not that it gets filtered out, because everybody still has this as an adult.
It's tucked away. And I had this argument with so many people. I've had this discussion with actually Joe, who owns the network. And I said, everybody has these abilities. And his belief, and I respect his belief, but I don't agree. He says only certain people. No, we all have it. And some people, like I say, just like some people come in as a natural born athlete, mathematician, leader, whatever it may be, and they maintain that throughout their whole life, doesn't mean they don't have other abilities or gifts, or they're not able to unlock or be able to learn how to do it. I believe we all have this ability. We just have locked it away because of whatever the reason is.
I quite agree with you, and actually, that's really what I wanted to teach people to do in Beyond Sex and Soup. Once you start to take yourself seriously, because that's really what happens, isn't it? We don't trust ourselves anymore. So yes, we learn as adolescents that we've got to be like this, we've got to do this, and we've got to kind of put ourselves out there or whatever. And then we don't trust either our personal desires, our inner wishes, and we don't trust things that are not rated, like our imagination, even though it's unique to us. Because although every human body speaks the same language, your story from the point where you came in to where you're going when you leave is unique to you. There is no one else on the planet who has the same story, the same reasons why they've got to the place you're in. So it's beautiful. It is a great discovery to find out, why you are where you are, and what you want to do with it and where you want to go. So
I love that. Sorry, I was just going to say, I love that, because you're right. People think that life is happening to them instead of, and I don't want to make this sound elitist to people listening. I'm not meaning it that way. I'm hoping by this conversation that we're sharing with you a different perspective, that it's possible when you start to explore it and you realize, and start little. Like even the fact about, let's get into manifestation quickly. We live in a planet of manifestation. Everything that exists here, somebody has thought of or made, besides what was here in the way of whatever somebody's belief system is, whether it's God, creator, Buddha, whoever you believe that is. Basically anything in nature. Okay, we didn't make it, we could grow it, we can cultivate it, but it was here. But anything else has been thought up. It was an idea. Somebody somehow brought it to fruition and has now come into the physicality. We all are capable of that. And if you don't believe it, I always say to people, start with something small. Start with something really small.
I absolutely agree with that. And I would say more than that. I would say these things that have changed our lives, like jet engines or the internet, here we are, I would never be able to have this conversation with you. They didn't come into being because somebody thought, oh, I'm going to make a load of money doing this. It came into being because somebody was in love with the idea. Fall in love, the Wright brothers, they never made any money out of, well, maybe they did. But anyway, it was a passion to make a flying machine. And they would have given everything to conclude that passion and make it happen. And likewise, making connections as a passion for the possibility of connecting across a non-physical bandwidth. And ultimately, these things end up changing all of our lives, and they're hugely powerful. They're more powerful than politics. They're more powerful than commerce. They are inventions that people have fallen in love with. And then if you think about it, our very existence is a product of love. So it isn't always perhaps what we would call a beautiful relationship, but initially, two people come together because they love or want to be together, and they create another being. And this ultimately creates villages and settlements, and the settlements need connection and trade, and everything that we experience is a product of this passion that I call rocket fuel, which we know as love.
Yes, love. Love is one of the most powerful, I think the most powerful emotion. Actually, 2 videos on my YouTube channel. And I always tell people, I'm not trying to promote my YouTube channel. It's not really big, but I share these videos at least a couple times a week. And one of them is called How to Create a Love Shield. Because we run into people who feel, and I believe in people being empathic or having, being an empath, and they feel like, I've heard so many people say, oh, it's such a curse. And I say, well, what if you embraced it as a superpower, but you just learned how to manage it? And so I believe that when we're creating an energetic shield, Well, I come from a place of fear. So I always tell people it takes longer to explain than it does to do. And the reason why is I walk people through, well, they can create it while I'm talking. And then after the video is over, they're not walking away and going, what was step 7 again? They know because they've created
Yeah.
their own, and the same as grounding and gritting, because I feel you were talking a little bit about the earth earlier. And it is, I mean, it's here, it anchors us to this planet. And the balance all these things you were talking about, exactly, we're meant to live in balance. And part of that is, we can send even some of these emotions I talk about into the earth and imagine it being transformed, sent back up to you, if you will, and into something positive. And then I use photosynthesis as an example with plants and how they take our carbon dioxide in and send out oxygen. It's kind of the same thing, right?
Absolutely the same thing. And I, like you, I use guided meditations. I have some that are on my website, and
Okay.
just to tune in and try it out, because you will find that you can do. I have one which I call an earth healing meditation, which is exactly what you're describing, where you just take the pain, whether that's physical or emotional, and you put it into the earth, and you just let that get destroyed, as things do get destroyed by the earth. I mean, that's the function of us letting go of all our stuff, that the earth transforms it.
I call it alchemizing into something, whether you
Exactly.
want to imagine it as stars or firework, whatever you want, like use that's where I say the imagination comes into these things.
And the point really is, you may think this is just an imaginative game, but you will feel physically different.
Yes.
And it might take you 5 minutes, and you might think, oh my God, if anybody's watching, they'll think I'm completely insane. But if you're going through a difficult time, like you have a lot of fear or a lot of pain, you can do it 20 times a day. And honestly, the difference is enormous. Like at the beginning, you will feel this agony, and you'll be pacing around, and how can I deal with this? And you just go and do one of these 5-10 minute meditations. You'll feel better. And then a few hours later, maybe you need to do it again, and maybe you need to do it again. And the process is that you are letting it go, and you can see what you're letting go, and you don't feel it again after that.
I agree. Or even with like medical intuition, you look into somebody's body and people think, well, you can't do that. They don't have x-ray vision. No, you see it in the mind's eye. People have energy, whether you can see it or not. Everything on this planet is energy, right? And you know this, and most people that have listened to this or here know this, but anybody listening, one of the laws of physics is energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but transferred from one place to another, right? So that we have energy lines. That's why, things like acupuncture, reflexology, I mean, I could go on, yoga, Tai Chi, you name it all. It works. Body talk, for example, I've had that done. And this is before I realized my own abilities that I've had my whole life. I was astounded the things this woman, for people, I don't think I've ever talked about this either on this show. I went there because I am a chronic pain sufferer. It's getting better and better. And I know eventually it will be able to relieve it totally, and that is my goal. It's been for years though. And I went for a body talk session. This is when my children were small. And I always say around July the 10th, I remind my eldest son, who will be 27 on July 14th. So happy birthday, sweetheart. He doesn't listen to my podcast, but just in case. But I was in 5 days of labor with that child, my first child. So July the 10th, I always remember. But I forget where I was going with this. My God, I got off track here.
Body talk.
Body talk. Thank you. So when I went for a body talk session, and he had to be about 9 or 10, and when the woman said, I didn't tell her any of this. And all she does, if you haven't had this done, folks, is you lay on a table, you relax, and she holds your wrist, and all she does is jiggle it back and forth. And one way is a yes, one is a no. It doesn't hurt, it's not painful. And she asks questions, and she's got these huge charts on the wall about this meridian and that. It would have made more sense now probably if I had it, but back then I was more from the big pharma background. Anyways, she then says, your oldest child, you had a male obstetrician gynecologist. I thought, that's kind of weird. How'd she know that? And you had this and this and this during your labor. And oh my goodness, it was 5 days, and on and on and on. It was like she was in the delivery room. And I kept saying to her, how are you knowing all this? She goes, believe me, I'm not psychic. Your body is telling me. And then she would come up with specific dates, like from childhood and a time. And I didn't even remember it, but it needed clearing. My body would apparently tell her. And this sounds crazy, folks, but believe me, it works. And I asked her so many questions because I have that kind of mind, because she would ask it. And then she'd be tapping here on your top of your head for people that can't see, and over, and she'd keep tapping, and then she'd stop, like she'd know it was cleared. So I had to ask her, well, how do you know when to stop? Like, how do you know when it's cleared? And I started paying attention, because she said either I'll hear a gurgle, or you'll need to take a deep breath, or something that will tell me physically that it's releasing. And she was right. So here's somebody that can facilitate it, but you're teaching people with your book how we can start doing this ourselves. Not necessarily body talk, but listening to our bodies.
It's very similar. It's very similar to what I do when I'm working with clients. So I work either through the body, doing lomi lomi, Hawaiian massage, or I work through healing. Where I'm looking, as you were saying, I'm looking at the energy inside the body.
Yeah, that's what we look for, yeah.
And, they both work for different, they're kind of like two ends of the string.
Yeah, but
it's your tools.
It's your tools and my tools for the same end result that work for us to help other people.
Exactly. And, I find that the body presents the issue that needs to be presented at that particular time. But in fact, that's healing, and it's always nice to have a healer. It's like, oh my goodness, the repairman's coming and he's going to sort my car out, and I don't have to do anything, just kind of give him a check and then that's done. That is so nice. And it's a beautiful thing to do, and I love to do it. However, it's even better if you know how to drive the car.
Yes.
It's even better if you can carry on the work and shift things yourself. So for me, it was like my first experience of the kind of healing I practice, which I call body mirror healing. After it was developed by an American called Martin Brofman. And he was a very sharp character, very, very precise in his understanding of the way the body works. And he was a great teacher. But when he did, a little bit like your experience, when I went to him for healing the first time, although it wasn't the first time I'd had healing, it was the first time anybody had really explained to me, just like your body talk healer did, what he could see in my body as well as shifting it. So it was like I went home with this, oh my God, I didn't think any of this stuff mattered anymore. I can't believe that he saw all this, but if he could see it, then it must be important. And I've been carrying it around all this time with absolutely no notion that it mattered at all in my life. And once he had done that, it was almost like the division between the reality that I thought I was living and that other reality. It was like it crumbled, I felt like kind of Alice walking through the looking glass, And I could see like both sides of the picture. I could see exactly why some things had happened when they'd happened and how things had developed. And I still couldn't quite believe it. But gradually, as I started to work on myself, I found it was like miming feelings, that would pop out of a tin just the same as they felt when I was 3 or 4 years old or whatever. And that was a shock. But
well, it is a shock because you'll meet so many people say, well, I went through this and this and this, but I've dealt with it. It's all gone. It's all gone.
Yeah.
Does it ever really go? Like sometimes you need a little bit of a tune up or dig a little deeper. But I think once a physical symptom that's associated with it or for yourself, like a brain tumor. And I know people would love to hear more about your story with that in a minute if you're open to sharing it.
Sure.
But the thing is, people have been led to believe, well, cancer, chemo, radiation, that's it. Instead of realizing that there's so many other options out there, right? But people are afraid and they don't know who to listen to, especially if you haven't been exposed to this type of healing work before, which used to be the norm back in like the night before the 1920s. It was the norm to be doing this kind of stuff. I did want to address something, Debbie, you're right. EFT, it can be amazing for people who haven't heard of that. It's tapping or emotional freedom technique. But this wasn't what was in body talk. It was a form of tapping, but not what you would do with EFT, because EFT is a specific process and points. I know you know this, and I know Debbie knows it, but for people listening, and I wanted to mention quickly, because I need to make a video, because with Crystal Reiki, people have no clue what is involved with that. And I did a short teaching session with two lovely ladies that are from the UK, but are Canadian citizens now. And one of them's in Mexico. And we get together we talk every day, but every couple of weeks we get together. And sometimes we'll do a teaching session. Sometimes we just connect with spirit, the three of us. And I did a 20-minute teaching session on Crystal Reiki, and I could not believe the questions. And I gave out the symbols, or 15 symbols, but it's dealing with the chakras and balancing the chakras with crystal. You may know what it is with crystals and Reiki and what have you. But I do a history the first time someone comes to me, and without fail, the chakras will show exactly what they're coming to me for, or why, or how. And then for those listening, after it's all done, I pull the energy down, we ground it, and then I check the aura with a selenite wand, it's called, with the pendulum first, and then I use a selenite wand energetically to seal any holes or cracks. And for those that think that energy field sounds really woo-woo, it's just akin to personal space. Someone standing that you don't know that well in your quote unquote personal space, people will automatically back up. It feels uncomfortable. That's your energy field, I believe, anyways.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's established. You do have an energy field, and you can see other people's energy fields. And again, this is not everybody can do it. It's just not the way we normally use our eyes.
That's right.
We have peripheral vision and we have predator vision. So predator vision is when you look right in the middle of your eye and you focus on something and it's sharp and you know the distance between it and you, and you're born with that because you have to be able to hunt. But you also have peripheral vision, which is the vision that you use to defend yourself. It's the vision that you use to read things, to read situations, to read, whether someone is going to leap at you or not. And it's actually changing the way you look allows you to see more.
True. I love that. I love it.
So I see most with my eyes closed. But, when you develop the confidence of what you see with your eyes closed, then you can see begin to look and see with your eyes open and see much more than you thought you could see.
Plus, the other thing I encourage people to do is, what if you just went through, say, give yourself a goal, a day, 2 days, maybe a week. Pay attention to the things happening around you and do not allow yourself to entertain that maybe it's a coincidence. How about if you were able to be open to the fact that coincidence doesn't exist? And once you allow yourself to believe that, and you start realizing the synchronicities that happen all around us and what we see, again, just what you said, your eyes are opened up. You realize you've been seeing so much more than you ever thought you were seeing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, you are all the time anyway. You see so much more than you can cope with. And that's why our vision has narrowed, because you have to, for self-preservation, you have to know, I have to know where the chair is, I have to know how high the door is, or whether the door is open or shut. I mean, that would be crazy if I couldn't see those things.
Right.
And so I filter out a lot of other stuff which is not physical, because I need to concentrate on the physical. But just because I'm unconsciously filtering it out, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you can allow yourself to filter it in. But I really like what you said about the body, because that information is all what you need to learn for your life is held onto by your body. It is like a pet. It will not let go of something. And then if you do develop a serious illness, at the very least, it's helpful to understand how that came about, rather than just to try and cut it out or destroy it. Because if you don't have that understanding, you're not really in charge of the development of that illness. It may be that you're not as lucky as I was. I mean, what happened to me was that I took time off. Should I tell you this story? This is about finding out that I had a brain tumor.
I'm glad, because some of these things, I usually say this with my guests. We have the synchronicity mentally, telepathically going on, because I was just about to ask you when you finished your sentence. So please continue to talk about exactly
so
what
happened was that I was working for the BBC, and it was a fantastic job, but I had done it for a long time, and I felt sort of I spent my life helping people to tell their stories, but I felt like I felt like there was a lot of talking without very much changing. It was in the world of politics and so forth.
Oh, wow.
And I remember saying to somebody who I was working with, I said to her, look, if I could make 5 minutes, if I could make real difference to one person's life for 5 minutes, that would be worth more than all of these conversations,
right?
Never result in anything changing.
Careful what you ask for.
Exactly. So I was quite frustrated by it. And then I started to write. I fell in love with this ancestors book, this herbalist. After my father died, I borrowed this 17th century book that he had that was written by an ancestor. And this man was a herbalist to Charles I. He had the same name as us. He was called John Parkinson. And he was extraordinary because he was passionate about plants. And he wrote the first books in English about plants. One of them is like the size of a small suitcase. It's everything where this plant came from, how it was used by the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, his contemporaries, who gave it to who.
Wow.
Basically, he just loved them, and he used them for medicine, and he wrote these books for what he called the commonwealth, meaning the common good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd seen this book, but I'd never read it. And after my father died, I took it home and I read it. I don't know where that came from, this impulse. But of course, as soon as I actually sat down to read this book, I fell in love. I fell in love with this wise man who was, it could have been like walking around my own garden because the plants haven't changed.
That's true.
It was just the knowledge of them was so profound. So I started to piece together his story, who he was, where he came from, why he was so passionate about plants. And it became this really fascinating story about another time of transition in our culture, when we were just developing, we were discovering the Americas.
Okay.
We were, inventing the first bank. We had the first long distance trading company, the East India Trading Company. And of course, in England, there was a civil war, and people were trying to develop their own knowledge of Christianity and break away from the Roman authority. And it was chaos, very much similar to what's happening now. Old institutions were breaking down and new ones were being developed. And so I started to write this book. I became passionate about the story. And 2 weeks after I started, I was having all these physical symptoms and I was just ignoring them and ignoring them.
Oh, wow. Thinking, right, I'm reading this. It's all in my head.
And I had to go and have a brain scan, and I went to see the neurologist, and he said, "You have a brain tumor."
Oh, wow.
And it's going to have to come out. So I said, "How?" And he said, "Oh, well, they just kind of cut open your face and they can in underneath there, and then they can just take it out that way. Or," he said, "they can take the top of your head off and then they just lift the brain out and then they can get in that way. We'll be in touch."
Have a good day.
So I went home and, well, just basically, I kind of had nightmares at night and carried on during the day. That's just how it was. I thought, well, if I'm going to go blind or die, I'm damn well going to finish this book first. But also, I'm not going to waste any more of my life in the BBC. And of course, that's what your body does for you. It gives you a royal kick up the ass, if you'll excuse my language.
No, it's true.
It will not let you ignore it. And so my next sequence of events was to try and cope with these symptoms, but to work as hard as I could in case the symptoms wouldn't let me do it anymore.
Oh, I hear you.
And actually what happened was, as I said to you at the beginning, I began to listen to my own internal conversation because I was in such a crisis. And my brain, or my internal mind, was working overtime all the time. And one of the things it said to me is, "This is your head. It doesn't belong to the doctors. It's your head." And it was kind of like a sort of inner rebel coming up and going, "Okay, I've got to deal with this." And I realized that I was wasting a lot of energy being angry with my mother, and I didn't have that energy to spare. I just had to focus all my energy on what I needed to do. And what happened was that I was lucky to find a doctor that I liked. And it wasn't their fault that I didn't like them. They were just going to do horrible things to me.
Yeah, so by nature, you're not going to like them. I totally get it.
And this doctor, he took another scan, and everybody told me he is the best surgeon you'll find in the whole country. And, he has a worldwide reputation. And he said, I can't operate. It's too deep. I'm not sure what it is, and it's buried in there, and I can't operate. Mm-hmm. So actually, that turned out to be, at the time, I thought it was really frustrating, because if he had said he could operate, I would just have made a date in my diary and pitched up.
So this was a gift.
It was a real gift. I was so lucky. And then he said, well, so I said, what are you going to do? And he said, well, we're just going to wait and see. And eventually, I would go back every 3 months for these scans, And eventually I realized, what are they waiting to see? And I realized that they were waiting to see if I got so bad that they had to operate.
Yeah, they didn't have a choice.
And again, I thought, I don't like this. I don't like the way it's going. And luckily, I was surrounded by lovely people who offered me all kinds of alternatives. And I began to explore. And I explored healing and acupuncture and different diets, all of these things, as you do. And then eventually, I met the man who gave me this particular form of healing. And just because he explained to my very cynical, overactive intellectual mind what he had seen and what he was doing, I got it. So it's like instant. I got it. And I realized that, yes, I was a rational human being who had a brain and I could function, but I was also a kind of logical, extraordinary, magical, spiritual creature who seemed to know more about what was going on than I had any idea of. And that somehow I needed to meet my other self and work with myself. So that was the beginning of my learning how to heal and dealing with my own stuff. So I did a lot of guided meditation. I guided myself through the process that I explain, or the processes that I explain in Beyond Sex and Soup. And I found them so powerful. I felt myself shedding complicated relationships that had been there all my life. And I worked really hard on visualizing this tumor disappearing. And all I can say is eventually it did. And I also learned how to heal. And I began to heal other people. And then those healings that I gave to other people, and I'm sure this is your experience, they taught me so much.
People, yes.
I would never have said before I began to be a healer, oh, I know that you've had a past life. Because I would have said, well, how do you know? But when I began to heal, I could see it. And when I would explain to people quite nervously, really, because it seemed to be so different from what they seemed to be on the outside, I think that you were a crusader in a past life and your leg got cut off, and then all your fellow warriors left you to die and you felt abandoned because they couldn't carry you. Does that make any sense to you? And somebody who was like an urbane banker would say, oh yes, completely, until I was 6 to be a priest. And I, oh, okay, thank you for telling me. So, I would not have known this without that journey.
Well, I'm going to, go ahead,
Trust
sorry.
yourself, child.
Sorry, what was that?
You have to trust yourself like a child. We were having that conversation earlier.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to add, and I'll give a few shout outs to a few people here. And I'm sorry, guys, we're having such an in-depth conversation. I'm highlighting your comments, but I think this is helpful for everybody to hear. So we had Soul Legacy with Alone. Sorry, I think it's Iona. Sorry, Iona. She's over in the UK. So is Anna, because she said it's late. I'm just popping in. She's going to watch the replay, but she made a few comments. And then we have Aiden Gaming. Hi, Lorilei. It's Justine, Gerald's sister-in-law. So welcome. Hi. And Debbie called you a healing goddess. I agree, Debbie. But I really believe in past lives too. I'm sharing all kinds of personal stories. I don't usually do this, but I had the strangest story confirmed for me about a past life from two strangers, and I'll tell it as quickly as possible. I used to do a weekly live with a group on Facebook. We're no longer involved. But I had met a younger person who was learning about their spirituality, and we just started working together, and we taught each other a lot. You can learn a lot from everybody that crosses your path. But he had said to me, when he first started talking to me, I know you. And I said, of course you know me. We're talking, right? And he said, no, I know you. And he claimed to be an angel before. I don't question what people tell me. Always tell me it's not my job to judge. And he said, he goes, have you ever heard of Lady Titania from Macbeth? And I said, that kind of rings a bell from high school. He said she had a sister, and you were the sister. And he said, what did he tell me he used to call? Oh, he said, I used to call you Maeve. And he described me. He said, I used to wear this crown of thorns on my head. I was from the fairy realm, but very tall. I had this shimmering, long, straight black hair. He said it would have sold every shampoo commercial nowadays if I could show it. And he said, you had the most incredible gray silver eyes. And he said, you weren't negative or nasty, but he said you didn't take any crap from anybody, and you would dole out retribution if you saw fit. And I thought, okay, fine. All of a sudden I knew what my name was. I said, my name wasn't Maeve, it was Maven. And then I do draw, but I do it very rarely. It was 3:30 in the morning a couple nights later, and I very quickly drew the most beautiful unicorn / Pegasus with wings, but I knew who this was, that she was involved in that lifetime. I called her Chloe. She was not my pet. She wasn't my familiar. We were equals. We worked together. Okay, this is where the strange part comes in. When I was taking my crystal Reiki, we had to do our attunement, and it was by distance. And it was a Friday night. I was supposed to be there at 7:00. This never happens. I fell asleep. And my mentor had said, and if you're not there, I'll know you're not there. I woke up at 7:30 on the dot, and I messaged her. I said, I'm so sorry. I fell asleep. She says, no worries. I did the meditation. I recorded it and sent it to you. Listen to it when you're able. 5 days later, on a Tuesday evening, I decided I'm going to listen to this recording that was done on the Friday. I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to sit on? I thought, oh, I just bought this beautiful, I love unicorns, this beautiful white fluffy blanket. And I'm sitting there, my hair is all tied back at the nape of my neck. I never wear it like that. I had all these crystals around me. I'm listening to this meditation, and I just about fall over because she goes, I see you sitting there. You're sitting on something really white and fluffy. I don't know what it is. And she says, yeah, I don't think I've ever seen your hair that way. It's tied up at the back of your neck, and you've got these crystals all around you. But this is where the story gets strange. She starts attuning me to all the symbols. And one of the symbols is a 7-pointed star. And her exact words were, holy cow, I don't know what it is with your higher self, but you just grabbed that 7-pointed star and you slapped it on your head. As she said that, she starts to describe me almost identically to the gentleman who had claimed to be the angel that knew me in that past life. Not by the name, but the appearance, the whole bit. And she
Wow.
goes, you remind me of fairies, but very quickly. By the end of it, she says, yeah, I didn't even know this figurine existed. And she said, but I saw it instantly. It reminded me of you. And she sent me a picture of a fairy statuette she didn't even know she had. I know it was a bit of a longer story, but there you go, folks. Two people didn't
It's
know
a
each other.
great story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great story. Titania is in Midsummer Night's Dream, isn't she?
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. You are so
And
right.
she was the queen of the fairies.
Yes,
and so
I was her sister. I was her sister, apparently. Now,
Mm-hmm.
again, I people will message me and say, okay, this is going to sound pretty strange. And I always say, try me. Just because I haven't heard of it doesn't mean it didn't happen. But again, two people telling me this that didn't know each other, didn't speak to each other. And so there you go, right?
So what I always think, so I actually think you probably have had lots of past lives.
Oh, yeah, thousands.
What is important is, to me, when I'm healing people, is like I said, because I think we've all got so many multiple layers, and just like the millions of pieces of data that come into our lives that we don't allow ourselves to see. When I'm healing somebody, what's important is the effect that a particular past life may or may not have had on their experience of reality in this one.
I agree.
So for this particular individual that I was talking about, his experience working as a banker is that he was, because when he said to me, oh yeah, I get this kind of crusader story, I said, well, this is in your root chakra. And he had come to me with an extremely painful back. He'd had 2 back surgeries and they hadn't worked, and he was in terrible pain. And the root chakra is about the skeleton and the back. So I said, this will be an issue where the pain is generated by your anger about something to do with security. Mm-hmm. And after I'd done the healing and I'd seen this crusader story, and he'd allowed me, this to entertain this as a emotional reality for him, I said, well, the effect would be in your current life that you would be in work situations, anything that had to do with job, money, home, and you would feel abandoned by your colleagues. And he said, that's what happens to me all the time. Wow. I think they're my friends and I'm working with them, and then I find myself out cold. So for him, becoming aware that perhaps he needed to work to release himself from this expectation of being abandoned and left in pain to die, would change his experience of things that had to do with security. That was important. And that's really, when it goes from healing, which can have, as you know, instant magical effects. Mm-hmm. I think magic is just something that we don't understand. So I agree. but also then there's this additional thing of what you can do for yourself, and that is really beautiful. You can do so much.
I just, I'm sorry, I don't usually share all these personal stories and everything, but I'm really enjoying
getting to know you.
I'm really enjoying our conversation. I know if you're open to it, we're not done yet. We've got a little bit of time left still, but I'm going to have you come back because there's so much to talk about with you. But the one thing I was hoping, we've got, let's see, we usually finish 5 minutes before the hour, and my time at 7:40. So we finish at 7:55, but I think we got about 15 minutes. But you had mentioned that part of this book that we're talking about, Beyond Sex and Soup, you were talking about part of this was about your mother, the relationship with your mother, and are you comfortable talking about that part
Absolutely,
of the book?
Absolutely.
I think it'll help a lot of people.
It was the most extraordinary thing because I wrote one of my brain tumor had been shown to have disappeared on a scan. By this time, I had been healing for several years. I'd left the BBC, I'd published my first book, and everything was fine. But then a couple of incidents happened, and I thought, oh, I need to verify that this has gone. It's not just enough for me to say it's done. I had no more symptoms. I was fine, but so I booked a scan, and I went and I had the scan, and the same consultant, bless him, he was poring over these x-rays. He said he can't see it.
Yeah. What's wrong with my eyes?
And then he found this tiny little bit, and I just felt exultant. And then I thought, okay, this was not an instant miracle for me. It was a process, and I would like to explain this process for people who are dealing with physical problems. So that's why I wrote Change Your Mind, Heal Your Body, and that's what it does. But as well as this, I knew that there was more, because, there's a lot that happens before we get ill. There's a lot of breakups and jealousy, and I don't talk to her anymore, and all this kind of stuff that goes on in our lives. There's a lot of drama, and all of that actually is part of the same story. And so I was teaching workshops where I was teaching this stuff, and I thought, well, I'm just going to write a book which explains how the inner world is related to the outer world. And it seems paradoxical, but actually you can manage this amazing balance between the two if you just learn to talk through the inner world. And by this time, there was a huge improvement in my relationship with my mother. I mean, I've done a lot of work on that. As I said at the beginning, when I got ill, I just did not have time or space to be angry, and
priorities change.
They do. And as I started to write this book, I don't like to just tell people stuff. I like to tell stories and kind of make it more fun to read. And so, and then I thought, oh my God, I am trying to describe the universe. What am I doing here? And this thing that I thought was going to be so simple was just kind of getting wilder and wilder.
Bigger and bigger and bigger.
And then my mom got ill. And my mom was an amazing woman. She was a very powerful artist. And actually, it was the fact that we had different powers that kind of clashed that made our relationship difficult. But of course, she did need me. And I also realized as soon as she got ill that I needed to do everything in my power to look after her, so that she could, if she wasn't going to get better, and it seemed unlikely, she was 94.
Oh, yeah.
And this experience you had with palliative care will explain everything that I felt. She has to go through this experience in the best possible way, in her best possible environment. So, of course, my whole life was thrown upside down because my mom had lost. And I was dealing with this. And at the same time, I was writing this book. And I sort of felt, this puts everything into perspective. This is how I get the universe and write it on a grain of rice, because she has lived this amazing life and it's going. She's losing it. And we all, only when we're really losing our life do we realize how beautiful it is
and precious.
What an incredible adventure it is. And so her story, which is sad because she's dying, but also she was so funny. She was like a feisty old woman who would not have anybody look after her because she could manage by herself.
Yeah.
She was crazy.
I've been there. It's got to be their idea. You're just there just in case.
So know, her story runs all the way through it. And I really resonated with you when you said how much dealing with palliative care in that really difficult neighborhood taught you. Dealing with my mother's last months was really, really the hardest thing I have done, but it was also beautiful. And I am so happy that I was able to do that with her, because it taught me so much. And that's in the book too, because it's really about what we were saying earlier. It's about not just the power of love in your daily life, but the fact that this is a universal power that goes beyond life and therefore connects you with everything. And you experience that with someone who is dying. If you can be open to their needs, they open your heart. And that is really, really a powerful thing to experience.
It's very powerful. I am writing 3 books, and they sound like they're not related. One is I have an adult son with severe autism, in our journey with that. Just because I always say, we talked a little bit about this, there's so much to see and perceive that unless it's in your bubble, you don't pay attention to it. But about 35 years ago, it was 1 in 10,000 boys. Now, depending on where you live geographically, it's 1 in 38 to 1 in 43 children. And they're saying within the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be 1 in every second child. So what I'm doing by sharing our own story,
Yeah.
it's the type of book I was looking for when my son was diagnosed very young, at 11 months, years ago. And the second one is our paranormal experience. But the third one, and I'm collecting stories right now, but it's mostly from nurses and some first responders, but the incredible, amazing, unexplainable things that we witness as people transition back home, or like you said, the life lessons that they teach us, because they're so powerful, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Truly, truly.
Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes from somebody that's a family member, that you see them in a different light.
You also have such a close relationship because the body is crumbling, and that's never pretty. That's never pretty, but it's the same. It's very similar to that relationship that you have with an 18-month-old or a 2-year-old, where they still need you to look after their body. But there's this kind of, it's extraordinary. I suppose what I would say is that in our conversation up till now, I've talked about how the physical senses are there to keep your body safe. And when those physical senses are not fully developed or are diminishing, you don't need that safety barrier kind of thins or evaporates. And what shines out is the love or the spirit of the person. And actually, what I found with my mother is that from the moment that she actually died, her spirit was like so powerful. It was just like hitting me in the face. Everything that she had tried to express, everything internal that she tried to express through her work, through her writing, and that I maybe had tried to ignore because I wanted to get on with mine, was just like sort of bright, powerfully there. And that was extraordinary.
Well, what a legacy to share that journey. Sorry, I hope that didn't pause on us there. Are you still there? I hope so. Oh, good. My phone, I can't plug it in. I have to wear headphones, or I can't hear very well on what it is with the iPhone. But I was going to say, what a powerful story, because they always say there's 2 things in life we're guaranteed. I don't know for everybody with taxes, but death, definitely. And I also hope that one day we can normalize the process of death. I've studied death experiences professionally as well as personally for 40 years. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is an afterlife, that we are just having a human experience here in this lifetime right now. We are immortal, we are eternal, we go on forever, and that we will see all our loved ones again. There's too much. That's why I'm writing that third book, because people will think their loved one is hallucinating and they're talking about loved ones on the other side. They're there to greet you. They're there to help you come home. So
it's logical also to think, when we are not physical anymore, mm-hmm. we don't take up any space. We are consciousness. The consciousness doesn't take up any space.
Mm-hmm. And we can be everywhere.
Exactly. And consciousness can exist on many levels. Mm-hmm. And, when you think of your connection with someone you've loved who has died, I would ask my mother really mundane questions about what I should do with bits of her estate that I had to deal with after she'd gone. She was right there. As soon as it occurred to me that perhaps I should ask her, there was just no question that she had an opinion, and she stated it. So that is, I would perhaps, we don't know, but I would say that that's an extension of my consciousness and my consciousness connection with her consciousness. Mm-hmm. That doesn't stop her being somewhere else at the same time.
No, not at all.
Because, she's not physical anymore.
Mm-hmm. There's no limitations. Exactly. I have to tell you, Anna, I loved our conversation tonight. I am so glad you're here. I hope you will come back and we can continue this, because
I'd love to.
Well, I know we're going to talk anyways and stay in contact afterwards. I just feel like we have a lot in common, and I've absolutely loved this conversation. I want to thank everybody that was here, that joined in the conversation. I really appreciated your input. I know normally I involve you guys more, but I was trying to highlight your comments because I think what Anna had to say was thank you, Debbie. She just said fabulous show and discussion.
Oh, thank you.
I think these are topics that need to be talked about more, and I think they can help so many people. So please tell people where they can buy your books, how they can get a hold of you, Anna.
Okay, so you can buy my books actually in any bookshop. If they haven't got it, tell them they should have. So, or you can buy it obviously online from Amazon and so forth. So that's Beyond Sex and Soup, Living a Spiritual Adventure. Yes. Or if you're interested in the earlier book about dealing with physical problems, I'm afraid you're going to read a lot about me.
That's okay.
But that's Change Your Mind, Heal Your Body, and you can get that book from similar places. I have a website, which is just www.annaparkinson.com. And on that, there's a lot of information about workshops and some guided meditations and some information about healing. And you can contact me by email. So you can just send an email to anna@annaparkinson.com. And I'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jody, over in Australia. She just sent me a message. I saw it on Messenger. Loved your show. Thank you, Jody. Like I told you, we got people listening from all over. I so enjoy that you guys are all listening live, and ladies too. Also, I want to remind you, please remember to share. Also, that all of our archive shows off of UPRN are carried on anywhere where talk radio or podcasts are carried, such as iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Podbean, iHeartRadio. I think I covered most of them. You can find it. If you've got an app to hear those type of programming, you'll find our programming on there. Oh, actually, SoundCloud. Don't forget SoundCloud. So I will be back same time next week. If you ever want to get a hold of me with a show idea, book a session with myself, you can get a hold of me on facebook.com/The Angel Rock. And I have two groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all things paranormal, and then the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the things that we talked about this evening. Thank you again, Anna, for being here. Just love this. And
it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, and Debbie said she shared it to her spiritual group,
Oh,
Grins,
good.
Grins. So thank you, Debbie. Lastly, I want to remind you, next week we're going back to the paranormal. We're talking to Tom Riley from Ireland. He has written books about Oliver Cromwell and setting the story straight, and he's got all kinds of stories. My partner Dallas had him on the show. He is a lovely man, and he's got some interesting stories. So make sure to tune in, same time, same space. Anna, thank you. Thank you to
Thank
everybody.
you.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And we will see you same time next week. Much love and light.